This is Christopher John Bjerknes. It is June 24th, 2023. The Bolsheviks in Soviet Russia put on quite a show last night. They pretended that the leader of Wagner PMC, a private military corporation with troops in Ukraine that recruited heavily from prisons, run by a very disreputable character, Mr. Prigozhin. He pretended to stage a coup against Vladimir Putin. This was all fake. Putin was aware of everything and helped plan everything from the beginning. Mr. Prigozhin's troops had a very easy time entering Russia after he had been making threats for a very long time that he was going to conduct this coup. They pretended that Shogoi, the chief general of Russia, and others launched an attack on Prigozhin's troops and slaughtered 2,000 of them. That was also fake. Prigozhin had put on a similar show back when he was in Bakhmut, complaining about not getting enough ammunition. It should have been obvious that anyone who so heavily and publicly and internationally criticized Vladimir Putin would have been executed immediately if it was not part of Putin's planning. This was all done so that Putin comes to know who his friends and enemies are. Any generals, FSB people, GRU, Air Force commanders, Army commanders, anyone who sided with Prigozhin, who was not in on it, would immediately be identified as one of Putin's genuine enemies, and they will be eliminated. He also discovered who his friends were, both internally in Russia and internationally. Erdogan, the treacherous snake in Turkey who has repeatedly betrayed NATO for Putin and Russia, couldn't wait to inform Putin that he was 100% behind him. Other leaders rejected Putin, so all of this was a fact-finding mission. And it also makes it extremely difficult now for anyone to stage a real coup, because anyone who stages a real coup won't get any cooperation or assistance from anyone else in Russia, because everyone will be afraid that it was fake, like this Prigozhin fake coup. And they will be very reluctant to join in on the coup and assist it, because they will think that this is just another operation to determine who is disloyal to Putin and who is loyal to Putin. And they'll think that they will be betrayed and that the coup will be called off, just as this fake coup was called off. So it was a very clever ploy to prevent any real coup d'etats against Putin. It also serves to discredit and demoralize everyone who took this seriously and went out and declared to the public that Putin was going to be overthrown and that we were entering a new era and that the Ukraine war would now end. That heavily discredits and demoralizes all of those people, most of whom were very well-meaning and were deceived by this. Something else I want to cover in this talk is the fact that this has been a pattern of the Soviets from the very beginning of the Soviet Union, when Lenin instituted a program called Operation Trust, in which he set up characters who would go out and pretend to be anti-Bolshevik and anti-communist, so that they could infiltrate all of the genuine anti-Bolshevik and anti-communist movements, set them up, misadvise them, find out who they were, lure them into the Soviet Union so they could be captured, in America. Ayn Rand was part of it, to disseminate destructive propaganda in the U.S. to undermine American institutions, to turn Americans into selfish psychopaths who worked against one another's interests, to pit us against one another, and to promote the idea that communists had all the free rights to subvert society with their wealth and with their influence, because they had those great constitutional guarantees that the communists themselves want to eliminate. So it enabled them to take advantage of us, and this trust program was all a part of that. And what happened last night is kind of a very condensed version of Operation Trust, in which Prigozhin pretended to be against the war in Ukraine and lured all those who were genuinely against the war in Ukraine and who opposed Putin to expose themselves so that Putin could then wipe them out, and also made it impossible for any not impossible, but less likely that any future coup attempts would happen. And if they were to happen, that they would receive no support, because everyone would believe it was just fake again. It's very much like crying wolf over and over again. And this is part of the historical pattern, as I said, of that Operation Trust. Adolf Hitler was known as the icebreaker for the Soviet Union and set it up so that Stalin could take over all of Eastern Europe. In 1956, there was a fake Hungarian Revolution, which was very similar to this, which enabled the Soviets to move their tanks into Hungary. And the Maidan coup in 2014 was also faked by Putin and Russia and pinned on the West, and then Putin lied about it and brought in his little green men to seize Crimea, and he lied about that and said that they weren't his troops. Everything that Putin does is a lie on some level or another, and a complete deception. The whole fall of the Soviet Union was a deception, and this attack on Ukraine is meant to reverse what happened in that fake fall of the Soviet Union. So let's go over some of the things. I'd like to thank all those of you who have been contributing. I appreciate it very much. It helps to keep this, let's just call it a podcast, going. You can contribute at my website, cjbbooks.com. There will also be contribution links below. So let's go over some of the footage of this great show that the Soviet Russians put on for us. This is from Igor Shushko's Twitter feed. He had a very feverish night covering these events. Oh, come on and work. Anyway, this shows, there we go. This shows how Prigozhin's Wagner PMC troops just waltzed across the border with no resistance, no air attacks, no chemical weapons attacks, no tactical nuclear weapons dropped on them. It was all completely farcical. Putin knew very well that this was coming. He helped plan it. He opened the gates so that this could be conducted, and then all of his real enemies would be exposed, and any future coups d'etats would be prevented. There is our famous actor, the hot dog salesman, Prigozhin, who recruits prisoners to fight and slaughter Ukrainian civilians. A real lowlife. And Putin's chef, always been very close to Putin. He pretended to oppose him, and it was all a farce, all a show. The absurdity of it is exposed by these people posing in front of tanks It shows what a farce it all was from the very beginning. And again, this is from Igor Sushko, his web feed. I think he got taken in by the ruse. And here are the troops withdrawing. Lo and behold, it's all over now. The big show has ended. And it was Lukashenko who becomes the great hero who saved the world from Prigozhin's coup. So the Euromaiden revolution in Ukraine in 2014, that was all staged by the communists, by Putin, to provide him with a pretext to take over the Donbass and, well, not take it over, but generate an insurgency there and a festering wound that would weaken Ukraine and provide him with a pretext for his attack, which he recently launched. It also provided the pretext for him to annex Crimea, and it was all fake. It was as fake as the fall of the Soviet Union. And another event along those lines was the Hungarian Revolution of 1956, which enabled the Soviets to roll their tanks over Hungary and to oppress everyone and intimidate everyone. This is the Wikipedia page on that Operation Trust that was set up by Lenin. I'll read from it. Operation Trust was a counterintelligence operation of the State Political Directorate, GPU, of the Soviet Union. The operation, which was set up by the GPU's predecessor, Cheka, ran from 1921 to 1926, set up a fake anti-Bolshevik resistance organization, Monarchist Union of Central Russia, in order to help the OGPU identify real monarchists and anti-Bolsheviks. The created front company was called the Moscow Municipal Credit Association. The head of the MUCR was Alexander Yukashev, a former bureaucrat of the Ministry of Communications of Imperial Russia, who after the Russian Revolution joined the Narkomat of External Trade when the Soviets began to allow former specialists to resume positions of their expertise. This position allowed him to travel abroad and contact Russian immigrants. Yukashev was arrested for his contacts with the exiled white movement. The whole white movement was also faked and deliberately subverted all of the monarchist resistance to the Bolsheviks. It was completely controlled opposition that just gave a pretext for terrible, horrible bloodshed in the early years of the Bolshevik Revolution. Trotsky and the Chinese that he imported slaughtered 30 million Russians and Eastern Europeans in the Russian Empire by 1923. That was also used as a pretext for Hitler to do what he did. In the same year of his arrest, he was recruited in the Soviet secret police by Artur Artuzov. Anyway, this goes on to explain how they were used to lure people in the Soviet Union and figure out who the real opposition was, to undermine them, to give them bad advice, to get them arrested, to execute them, and to know what all their plans were in advance. This trust operation was described very well by Anatoly Golitsyn in his book, New Lies for All, which foretold this fake fall of the Soviet Union that happened afterwards. And he thoroughly describes the trust operation, what took place. It's well worth looking into if you're interested in this history. It also gives a lot of history of the other fake movements and the fake fights between Soviet Russia and Communist China like we see today. All the events that are happening now were essentially foretold by Golitsyn. There was a book published by Suvorov, which described the fact that Adolf Hitler was referred to as the icebreaker in the Soviet Union because he set it up so that Stalin could take over all of Eastern Europe. Suvorov notes all this. He believes that Hitler was authentic. I believe that Hitler was working for Stalin and the Zionists. Suvorov claims that Stalin's plan and vision was that Hitler's predictability and his violent reactionary ideas made him a candidate for the role of icebreaker for the communist revolution. By starting wars with European countries, Hitler would validate the Soviet entry into World War II by attacking Nazi Germany and liberating and Sovietizing all of Europe. That's exactly what happened in the Maidan Revolution when the fake neo-Nazis who were sponsored by Israel and Russia created this pretext for Putin to come in and denazify Ukraine. When he concluded the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact in 1939, Stalin clearly counted on the repetition of the 1914-1918 War of Attrition, World War I, which would leave the capitalist countries so exhausted that the USSR would sweep into Europe virtually unopposed, and that's exactly what happened. The First World War was a massive Soviet revolution. So that's my take on the farcical show that Prigozhin and Putin put on last night. Again, it was done to expose all of Putin's enemies, to reveal his true friends, both internally and internationally, to discredit and demoralize all of those who were hopeful that his horrific war on Ukraine would now end and the Russian people would be free of this mad dictator. And it made it much more difficult for anyone in the future to stage an authentic coup because everyone involved will think that it's like crying wolf and that it's fake, and that if they get involved in it, they'll get executed by President Putin and his henchmen. Thank you very much for watching. Please contribute so that I can do more of this work. There are contribution links at my website, cjbbooks.com, and in the description below. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Thank you very much.